Hi, you are watching The Buzz. My name is Debbie Klughers and I'm your host. I'm from East Hampton, New York, and I'm a commercial beekeeper. So this program is dedicated to all you beekeepers out there, all the honeybees that you keep, and all the flowers that you all help to make so beautiful. And everybody knows the flowers turn to fruit, which is food, and we all need to eat the food. So I guess this program is for everybody. We're going to discuss different topics in beekeeping. We're going to discuss what's in the news. We're going to talk about what's going on in the hives this week. We're going to visit honeybee hives. We're going to learn about different gizmos and gadgets that we can make for our honeybees, different types of ways to treat our honeybees. Honeybees have a problem called the varroa mite. Most people probably have heard of the varroa destructor by now, and they're very destructive to our honeybees and have been harming them for a few decades now. So we will learn when and why and how to treat our honeybee colonies and how to check them to see if they need treatment and or if our treatments are effective. So the buzz is going to buzz on through your electronic device and try to educate about honeybees and beekeeping and ways to keep them happy and healthy. And that only is helpful to all of us, of course, because again, they feed us and they also feed wildlife, and they make a home for wildlife and feed the birds through the berries and everything else. So we all know honeybees are important, so we're going to learn as much as we can and share that info. It's going to be a really good show. And this is my first show, and I was wondering what I was going to use as my in the news segment. And unfortunately, there was some news right here in my own beehives. I went to give one of my colonies some pollen the other day because it's spring and the queen is laying more inside of the hive, so we need to give them more pollen. So I was giving them a pollen patty, and the hive had appeared to have been poisoned by pesticides. And here's a short video of what I came upon. So you can see how they're just falling out of the entrance of their hive and onto the ground, and then there's just piles of dead honeybees and dying honeybees, and a lot of the dead bees, they had their tongues sticking out, and there were thousands of them. So it was a very sad day. I was very hurt by it, and more so because it's something that could be avoided. If I would have known that the spray was going to occur, there are many different beekeeping management techniques that I could use to keep the honeybees safe. I mean, I could have moved the hive, the most labor-intensive, move them, and then move them back in a couple weeks, or just in a couple days, whatever you need to do. I could have locked them in. It's cool enough. It's so cold out. So that's the other thing. Why are they spraying? What are they spraying? It would have been cool enough to lock the honeybees in since it was so cold. It was also very windy the day that the spraying occurred. So, perhaps a lot of it drifted or blew because of the wind. So that's another issue. It wasn't a good day to spray. So you see, it's pretty disturbing. I guess I should have given a disclaimer. It's pretty disturbing, and there were thousands of dead honeybees, and they were sick and dying. And as of today, which is only 2 days after the event, it's under investigation. What did they die from? What were they poisoned by, and by whom? And were any rules broken, or is this status quo? Are these kind of chemicals okay to spray, and why are we spraying? It's still in the 30s at night here in New York, and the trees are not even really budding at all. I mean, some trees are. It's very early spring, so what are we spraying into the trees? What are we trying to kill? We do have a problem with insects all across the world. We have an insect apocalypse in progress. All of the scientists agree. There's not very many bugs left, and they're very important to our whole ecosystem, and we're losing them. You know, not only the species that everyone is fond of, it's not just the monarch butterflies and the bumblebees and the honeybees. I mean, it's all kinds of moths and other pollinators that they pollinate our food, and they're very important to the food chain. So, very disturbing. I was very upset. The colony is, as of yesterday, they were seemingly okay, the ones that were left, but we'll see. That pesticide event could harm the queen's ability to reproduce in the coming months. So this is and plus we have to see the bees are being tested for pesticides. So we will find out, hopefully, they've been sent to a laboratory, and we will find out, hopefully, what killed them. So that's a stay tuned, for this. Each week we'll learn about what's going on in the beehive. What should we be doing to our bees at this time of year? We'll learn different beekeeping techniques, different things that we can make, different things that the honeybees need. We'll learn about recipes to make different kinds of food supplements for the honeybees. We'll talk about pollen, we'll talk about honey. We're going to visit the bees. It's going to be a really good show. So I hope that you keep watching and you enjoy it. So this episode, I am so honored to share with you Rich Blum. He is a master beekeeper for decades. He is a great friend and mentor to myself and to many other beekeepers and non-beekeepers alike. Stay tuned for Rich Blum. And ready to go?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Rich Blum. I'm from Huntington, Long Island, and I'm a beekeeper and have been keeping bees for approximately 46 years. So I started in 1973. Not only have I've been keeping bees for 46 years, but I've also studied a lot, and I took a very in-depth test, which is given by the Eastern Apiculture Society every year, and it's called the Master Beekeeper Test. So I've passed that test. It's a 4-level test. It's not very easy, and I'm very proud that I'm a master beekeeper. And being a master beekeeper, I teach other beekeepers the right way to keep bees. I encourage them to become beekeepers, but only if they're very passionate and are going to do everything it takes. The way I got started is my wife was a new teacher and befriended another teacher. It turns out her husband was a beekeeper, and we had dinner together, and he told me all about his bees, and I was so fascinated, and the fascination has only grown larger over the years. I'm still as fascinated, if not more fascinated, than I was then. Not only this fascination, but I was a gardener, and I'm interested in the environment and in nature. And when I was a kid, just for passing the time away, my friend and I would go to empty lots. I grew up in Queens, New York, and we'd go to the empty lots, and we would go in where there was lots of clover, and there was no broadleaf weed killer in those days that we have now, and there were lots of bees on the clover, and we would take a jar and we would catch as many bees as we could, And then we would, once we had a bunch of bees, we would just let them go and see where they would fly and see where they would go. It was just something, for kids to do, and we had a good time doing that. So I was always fascinated with bees, and it's just grown, and it's taken me all over the world. I keep about 50 colonies of bees, and I also run about 20 or 25 what we call nukes, which is short for nucleus colony. So these are small colonies I keep to raise queens in, and to also I winter some of those over, and if I lose any of my 50 main colonies, I can use them as replacements. Well, my favorite thing about beekeeping, number one has to be my love of honey, that it's so healthy, and the bees are so good for the environment. And one thing about bees, there's no other species on the planet like this, but everything that bees do is beneficial to man. Okay, they make honey, they make beeswax. We can make candles from the beeswax, and cosmetics that are non-allergenic. The bees pollinate most of our crop, well, at least a third of our crops that we eat, the fruits and vegetables we eat. And right down, when I say everything they do, right down to the bee sting. Okay, bee stings are used for treating arthritis. They've known that since Hippocrates' time. So, and now it's also used for other ailments like autoimmune diseases such as MS. The thing I find most fascinating about bees is their ability to all the things they do. That they can travel up to 2 miles or more from the hive and find their way back. They can learn landmarks to get back to the hive. They all go out and they come back in late in the day when it gets cool, and then also the fact that the bees, I find very fascinating that they are like us. They don't hibernate like other insects do. They need to feed in the wintertime. That's the reason they make so much honey. They store this honey and think of it as their pantry. Okay, so they're storing food up for the winter, and they live on that all winter long. And so as a beekeeper, we take honey, but we're very careful to leave an abundant amount left for them so they can survive the winter and continue to thrive next spring and hopefully even make more bees. One of the things I do as a beekeeper also is I do provide pollination to an apple orchard, which is necessary for us to have apples. So I bring in 10 or so colonies of bees every spring. The orchard gives me a call, tells me it's time, the blossoms are just about to bloom, bring in the bees, and then I leave them there for a week and a half to 2 weeks. And then they have to spray a fungicide right away after the pollination is finished. So they call me, and I take the bees back out again and put them back in an out apiary somewhere else. So that's one of the things that I do that's beneficial. And other than that, people love the honey we produce. I have I make a lot of honey, but I run out of honey every year before the next crop comes in. So it's very pleasurable to know that I'm helping people consume a sweetener that's actually healthier than all the other sweeteners. And by the way, when you talk about honey actually is the sweetener that uses the least amount of energy of any other sweetener. When you think of refined sugar and other things like maple syrup, they have to boil maple syrup and reduce it 30 to 1, and that uses lots of fossil fuels to do that. And so even agave takes a lot of energy to refine and produce, and then it has to be shipped long distances to get it to market. While you can find honey from a local beekeeper, and so very little energy is used to extract the honey. We don't have to process it all. All we do is strain it a bit, and if it's a local beekeeper, it uses very little energy to get the honey to your kitchen, so to speak. Another thing about honeybees is their importance to us and our environment. one thing I think about all the time, we have to be more and more conscious about the planet we live on, and I think of honeybees as the canary in the coal mine. And here's the problem today. Okay, we have all these indicators. Now, when you make the example, one makes an example of the canary in the coal mine. What did the coal miners do? As soon as the canary died in the coal mine, they knew it was time to get out of that coal mine quickly. Well, we have bees that we're losing and dying because of the environment. We're losing a lot of other insects, and a lot of other environments are crashing. And we're not running out of the coal mine. Most of us are just ignoring the problem and not, as individuals, doing something every day to help reduce the amount of fossil fuels we use and reduce the amount of products and plastics we use and help out our environment that's so critical. It has become a challenge today to keep bees alive because we had 2 infestations of parasitic mites, one that lives inside the bee in their tracheal tubes, and another mite called a varroa mite, which is an external mite. And if you, this mite is quite large compared to the size of a bee. So if I were a bee sitting here, and I had one of varroa mite on me, it would be about this big, almost the size of a dinner plate. So you can imagine the effect it has on bees. And so we have to control that in a hive, and it's very difficult to do that because what we're trying to do is to kill an insect that's on an insect. So we've had them for quite a long time now. They were introduced in the United States in the early 90s or the late 80s, and we used to use pesticides to try to kill the mites and not kill the bees. But we've come a long way, and we've found numerous ways to control the mites, and also using organic treatments, such as oxalic acid and formic acid, which are considered organic acids. And the other thing, we also lack forage for the bees. There's not as much forage. Like I said, when I was a kid, there was no broadleaf weed killer. And I tell new beekeepers, the first enemy of the honeybee was the lawnmower. When you think back, before, let's say, the turn of the last century, the people would have to cut the grass with a scythe. So there were lots of weeds, lots of flowers, an abundance. I've seen old pictures from beekeeping bee yards where in one yard, instead of like having 10 or 20, which we run today, they would have hundreds of bee colonies in one bee yard. Why? Because there was so much forage out there for them. Okay, and then the other thing they didn't have so many pesticides in the environment. And so and a lot of people think, I just, have the guy spray my lawn. Well, that pesticide, even though it's not going on flowers, it's going into the ground, it's going into the tree roots, it's going into the water supply. Bees gather water in the summer to cool the hive and raise their brood, and they're picking up lots of pesticides from the environment. So it's gotten very challenging to keep your bees alive and keep them healthy. Well, I think the most important issue is the beekeeper. The beekeeper being very knowledgeable. We're getting a lot of new beekeepers today, and they should be taking classes and reading as much as they can. Subscribe to the journals, keep up to date. You almost have to be a scientist today to be a beekeeper and keep your bees alive. There's too many beekeepers, and not the fault of their own, but they just think they're doing something good by becoming beekeepers and throwing some bees in their backyard, but they could become a source for other beekeepers because if that hive succumbs to the varroa mites and gets infested, other bees will come and steal out the honey, and they will bring these varroa mites back to their own colonies and reinfest them, and other diseases are spread that way. And some people, they ask me, I want to keep a beekeeper because I want to help the bees. And I tell them, if you're not really into it and are going to learn everything about it and be very passionate about it, then the best thing to do is stop using pesticides in your backyard and find flowers that you can plant that produce pollen and nectar that's good for the bees. Another problem we have is that people grow daffodils, tulips, rhododendrons, azaleas, even forsythia, which is blooming beautiful in the springtime, which is about to bloom very soon. None of those flowers produce nectar that honeybees go to. They don't produce pollen. Bees don't like them. Bees like flowers that produce a higher sugar content. You will see bumblebees on azaleas and rhododendrons, but you won't see honeybees. So you have to do some research, go online, and find seeds that you can buy that are good for honeybees. And don't mow the whole lawn. Make a little meadow somewhere in your backyard, and help nature. And by the way, also an important aspect of honeybees is because a lot of people love the birds, they love the wild birds. Well, honeybees pollinating the weeds out in the field are producing the seeds that the birds need to eat. So you heard about the birds and the bees. Well, the birds and bees they have a symbiotic relationship. So it's very important to have healthy bees, even wild bees. We have lots of different types of wild bees, or what we call native pollinators, such as bumblebees, orchard bees, carpenter bees also do pollination and gather nectar, and also need our attention. Around the world now, there's an apocalypse of insects of all kinds. It's spreading around the world. The entomologists are all coming back with the same information, that they're losing insects. There's not as many insects all over the world. And half our bird colonies, bird species, are insect eaters. And somehow us using all kinds of pesticides, we have to get away from that, and we have to find other ways to produce abundant amount of food so we can all eat, because we're basically shooting ourselves in the foot, and we have to stop. Thank you very much.
We're not done yet.
So don't forget, get flowers that help the bees out. Plant a linden tree or a black locust tree, any kind of fruit trees, and there's plenty of wildflowers. And look through some of the seed catalogs, and there'll be a section where they'll tell you this plant is good for the bees. I recently was given a talk. I was at a talk by a arborist, and he's also a beekeeper. But his major is he's a tree specialist. And what he showed was that he showed us a beautiful field of yellow flowers that was great for honeybees. Bees who love this. And it was several acres there. And he said, in these several acres, one linden tree will produce more nectar and pollen than that whole field. One of the things that beekeeping has done for me, besides giving me something that I have a real passion for, and I'll tell you, some people go through life without a passion for something. And I don't care if it's gardening or playing golf or whatever it is. Have a passion that challenges you on a regular basis, and I have that. And it also has taken me to parts of the world and parts of the country I probably would have never visited. We have an organization. We have the Eastern Apiculture Society. I've been all up and down the East Coast to conferences, and also out on the West Coast. I've been a part of the American Beekeeping Federation, and I've been to other parts of the country going to conferences there. Thirdly, we have the International Beekeepers Conference. So that's taken me to 1999. I went to Vancouver. I've also been in France, in Provence, and in a town called Montpellier, which was beautiful, beautiful trip, and learned more about beekeeping and what beekeepers around the world have been doing. And I've also been to Buenos Aires, another wonderful trip, another eye-opening thing to see other parts of the world, other people, other beekeepers. And this year, later on this year, I'll be going to Montreal to the next Apimundia International Beekeepers Conference, and looking forward to that. Be the caretakers of the bees. We are not bee havers, we're beekeepers. So that puts the onus on us to be responsible and take good care of them and keep them alive.
born. This is a female. Wow, right in time. This is a female, a worker bee. Takes them about 3 to 4 weeks to emerge from egg to adult. So we are seeing a new bee being born. That little girl coming out. And as soon as she comes out, she's going to get right to work. She's going to start taking care of the other babies, the larvae and the eggs. Here she comes. Here she comes. There she is. That is a new.